Okay, welcome. We are going to spend the next little bit together talking about bee safe backyards and different strategies. We're going to talk a little bit about different pesticides and some pollinator protection methods and how to recognize different types of exposure and that kind of thing. So, my name is Jenny Goforth, and I work for the Pollinator Stewardship Council. We're a small but mighty nonprofit, and we work nationally. Um, our organization has been around for a long time now. It was started by commercial beekeepers who were starting to see some pretty big issues with their bees and started realizing that pesticides and different chemistries were kind of behind some of those losses. And so they formed this advocacy group, this nonprofit, to start trying to address some of those issues. And we've got some pretty great board members. Just a terrific collection of folks. Some of them are commercial beekeepers, some are hobbyists, so really kind of a big range. We've got people from all over the country. Some names that you might be familiar with. We have Dave Hackenberg, who was the person who sort of discovered colony collapse disorder. And let's see, Steve Ellis, who has been a longtime pollinator advocate. He's in Minnesota and is a commercial beekeeper. We also have Brett Adey, who is has the largest beekeeping operation in the US. So yeah, just lots of really fantastic folks. And so I'm going to go ahead and just start the presentation. And what I would love is if folks could, as we go along, if there are any questions, if you wouldn't mind putting those in the chat, that would be super great. I will leave some time at the end, and we can, people can unmute themselves and we can go through the questions in the chat. I just don't want to miss anything. So it's okay if later the question gets answered. It's also possible that I may not know the answer. And if I don't know the answer, then I will make sure that I get that information to you. I might have to follow up with some of our beekeepers in our organization. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. And we will start off with bee safe backyards. So we're going to start by looking at pesticides and some pollinator protection, just some general topics. Really could be a wide range of experience levels coming into this. So I'm just going to give kind of an overview. We'll talk about how to recognize some signs of different types of exposure, but more specifically chronic exposure. We want to talk then about how to create some pollinator-friendly gardens, some different strategies to reduce risk, and some resources. So, what can we do to help mitigate, this damage? Okay. Oops, sorry. Let me resume that. Okay. Here we go. So, first of all, pollinators are responsible for one of every three bites of food we eat. So they're really super important. And, with this audience, I think I don't probably have to try to convince you of the importance of pollinators. 75% of our global crops benefit from animal pollination to some degree. So, really important. And later in the presentation toward the end, I'll suggest a few different documentaries that you might want to take a look at. One of them in particular talks quite a bit about this topic, and in our modern food system, what especially managed pollinators like honeybees do for our food system. So why is this important? So why do we have to protect pollinators? We know pollinators are important. So why do they need protection? So um, you know, in general, the average loss is pretty high now. This was not the case when you talk to beekeepers who have been keeping bees for, 50 years or something. There's a marked difference of when certain chemistries came into use and they saw big impacts on pollinators. And then we also can see this when we look at like native pollinators, and we look at some studies related to, populations in different, especially different like kind of ag heavy areas. So in 22 to 23, the average loss was like 50%, very close to 50% of colonies. In areas where there's a really high, like conventional farming, like, ag areas, oftentimes you have much higher losses. This year, some of you may be aware, all of you may be, that we had this crazy catastrophic loss in 2025, kind of the end of 2024 and the first part of this year. beekeepers experienced unprecedented losses. So we don't have all the numbers because people are still kind of experiencing things and collecting information, but it appears to be closer to 70%. And some commercial beekeepers have stated that they've experienced closer to something like a 90% loss. So so far, this is really, has been kind of the worst year on record for bees from everything that we're getting. So it's we often are fighting against this concept we see oftentimes in the media or on social media or something like, oh, the bees are fine, the bees have recovered, and really, unfortunately, they aren't. So one of the things that's happening is that we have ever increasing amounts of like chemical exposure. The US is 48 more times more toxic to insect life than it was 20 years ago. So some of this is because we have more products. Some of this is because we have fine product. Some of this is because we're just really better at making really strong concentrated products, right? And so it's sometimes confusing because people will say, well, we apply fewer pounds of pesticides on a particular crop than we used to. But unfortunately, that's not a measure of toxicity. It's more like we just have more efficient ways of killing pests. And so pound by pound is not really an adequate measurement. So how do pesticides impact pollinators? So we have these main four areas, and we're going to talk about a couple of them in particular. So acute, this is one that probably is the one that we think of the most often. It's really obvious, right? Bees come into contact with some sort of chemistry and they die. And it's very obvious they're dead bees. There are certain things that are highly toxic to bees. And for the most part, this is a kind of an easy one in terms of resolution. It's clear. Sometimes beekeepers will have an acute kill because someone accidentally sprayed. Maybe it was a pesticide company. Maybe it was like an applicator, or maybe it was a county or something spraying, and their bees die. And sometimes they, will follow up, and there'll be some sort of penalty for the loss of their bees. But it's very clear. Sublethal or chronic, really, we want to use the word chronic. Um, this type of pesticide exposure don't kill bees at a significant rate. And so it's hidden. And this one is the one that's we're going to talk a little bit more about because it's difficult to understand, but it's actually the most common way that pesticides impact pollinators. Another thing that happens is synergistic. So um, when someone applies a pesticide, there's research about what that pesticide does. And so, have this application rate, and it's been, the suggestion is it's safer for pollinators, but maybe it's applied the next day with some other kind of pesticide, or it's applied at the same time with some other kind of pesticide or fungicide or something. And that synergistic effect have an increased level of toxicity. So this becomes a problem, right? And this is something that isn't, certainly, you know, chemical manufacturers seeking to get some, product registered. They're not, we don't have a system in place for them to test every type of, other product that it might be applied with. And so there's really, you know, unfortunately, not really information in advance, right? So it's not something that we know about. We just see that it happens. Sometimes that means that it's an acute and exposure and insects die. Sometimes it's just a worse version of chronic. Another one is food availability. So an example of this is dicamba, which is a really common um, uh, herbicide that is used with in conjunction with like corn, well, like soybeans, cotton, that kind of thing. And so dicamba resistant soy, what happens is it's kind of like, a Roundup resistant product. Um, and this chemistry, it causes it, when it drifts, it will reduce the number of flowering plants. Now, a lot of farmers with this product in particular have, made reports to the EPA or have lawsuits, that kind of thing, because it's damaged their crops. But it's also impacting bees, right? So it reduces the number of flowering plants. And so this is a way that it also affects food availability. So acute exposure, here's a picture. I received this a few years ago. I think we had an article in bee culture about this. So this was a bee kill from an acute exposure in Georgia. So some hobbyist beekeeper, came out in the morning. Their bees were all, there was no sound. The bees, were dead. They saw them all over the ground. It was very obvious, and it took, not a lot of effort to determine that, there had been a mosquito spray the day before in the neighborhood. And even though they had, asked the pesticide applicator to not spray in their area, they kind of followed up with it, and made a incident report. And ultimately, there was, some action taken, because it was an improper application. So, but this was pretty obvious, right? Catastrophic and unfortunate, but they saw those trucks spraying around the neighborhood. It wasn't too difficult to put two and two together. So chronic exposure is the one that is more difficult to understand and recognize, and it's unfortunately the most common. And so studies have shown that neonics are a class of pesticides. We'll talk about those in another slide. Really common right now, super, super common in our system, not just ag, but in residential systems and that kind of thing too. They impair bees' ability to navigate and forage for food. They can weaken colonies, and they can make them prone to infestation by mites. So symptoms are subtle. So you don't have a pile of dead bees. So it's a little bit more challenging to determine. Um, so sublethal exposure can weaken colonies. So they um, maybe will be more susceptible for like varroa mite, that kind of thing. The decrease in population, that's another thing that can happen. They can just be sickened and weakened, and so they overall have a decrease in population, and it can prevent the hive then from building back up at the time the hive should be like at peak performance. So then this is another way, right? The bees are kind of weak. There aren't that many of them. They can't really build up. And so then that becomes a missed opportunity for honey harvest or for pollinator services if the colony is not in prime shape. And then sometimes those sick, weakened, or underpopulated colonies can fail. They can die. At best, they're requiring increased care and time. Instead of an asset, they become a liability. You're having to put a great deal of care into that hive, and sometimes, it just becomes a point of diminishing returns. Some symptoms of chronic exposure, and we say sublethal, but really it's that they don't die immediately. Over time, given, period of time with chronic exposure, ongoing chronic exposure, we do see that bees that will die. But and as that's happening, we see things like reduced bee populations. We see impaired queens. The queen supersedure is really a big one that we see. Poor overwintering. Hives unable to survive drops in temperatures. We see inability to manage common pests. Immune issues. So there's a lot of different things that can be attributed to chronic exposure with these different types of chemistries. And I wanted to just show this. I think this one is kind of interesting because, uh, you know, I it, these chemistries are designed to work like this. It's not something that is just like a happenstance. Or some sort of conspiracy or something. So this is a product, a neonic product, imidacloprid, and it's a product called Premise. And the idea is that this is for termites. So termites are a social insect like honeybees, and they work as interdependent units. And so what this product is designed to do is to interfere with their instinctive social behavior. So what happens with it is it causes them, it disorients them and causes them to lose their natural grooming behavior. So grooming is essential for them to protect them against, different fungi in the soil. When they stop grooming, the naturally occurring fungi in the soil attack and kill the termites. So it makes the fungi 10,000 more times more dangerous to termites. And this is the text here is from their label, so and the instructions, so it's not something that we're sort of gathering from what this product is supposed to do. It's actually what it's supposed to do. So you can see that in a situation with another social insect, honeybees, we could see some of the same kinds of behaviors. So um, this is why, so this would be like a sublethal, I'm sorry, not chronic exposure. We would have, they would be exposed to this over time, and then they would ultimately, it would cause them to die. One other thing that is challenging for beekeepers is that a lasting consequence of this type 2, the sublethal poisoning, the chronic exposure poisoning, is that the toxins also can remain in comb. So it poses a continuous risk for future bee generations because this equipment gets reused. And so we have been working on a study to measure the impact of neonics, the financial impact of neonics on honeybees from a commercial beekeeper standpoint. And it's been interesting to try to figure out all of the different factors in this, right? Like how often do you have to replace comb, or how often does the equipment need to be changed, that kind of thing. Has that changed? And it has, in even recommendation through university systems. If you look at publications from 20 years ago, there's a different yeah, the different recommendations regarding that timing than there is now. So that's another way that they can be impacted. So neonics are probably the most commonly talked about. They're really a common pesticide. There's a lot of different products with these. So really massive quantities that we see in our environment. So millions of pounds of the chemical applied to 140 commercial crops every year. So this is just an ag, but again, like I mentioned, it's, these types of products are applied in, different kinds of, all different kinds of situations, public areas and residential areas, that kind of stuff. One big one is seed coatings. So in the US, nearly all field planted corn and two-thirds of soybean use neonic coated seeds. They're not currently counted or tracked by regulatory agencies. So we track and we see how much is applied. This is not counted in that, but it's a huge amount. Um, so the chemical, it's a systemic chemical. So what's supposed to happen is the plant will be well, it will be applied to a plant, and it could be applied on seed coating, right? So the seed has it, or it could be applied as a foliar spray or something, so the plant tissue has it. But the plant will take it into all of its tissue. Um, and when we're planting seeds with this, the chemical, we're planting it right into the soil. So the chemical is found in soil samples from coast to coast. It's in waterways, it's in drinking water. There are lots of studies across the US where they do, we'll do groundwater samples, and it will be like, oh, 80% of, groundwater samples in the study are shown with neonics. So it is all through our environment. Um, and let's see here. So how these work is they target the central nervous system of insects, and they have both acute and sublethal effects. We don't see the acute as often because, of course, people using them are, I think, not setting out to kill bees. I mean, certainly, farmers like growing corn that we need and we consume are certainly friends of bees, not intending to cause harm with this. So we don't really see with some of these, acute is not as common, but that chronic certainly is. So increased susceptibility to diseases we talked about can change the reproductive rates, the foraging abilities. Like one of the things is there are studies talking about how bees do this wiggle dance to be able to communicate with each other, and they use it as a primary way to communicate, and they can't do it, right? They can't it changes the way that they communicate to each other, and they lose a lot of that ability, and then yeah, decrease learning abilities. So I mentioned the seed treatment's not counted as a pesticide application. There's so much that I learned after starting to work with this organization. I felt like I was kind of someone who was aware of different environmental kind of concepts, but th there were some big ones. Like I didn't know, for example, that when a manufacturer of a product wants to get that registered, I incorrectly assumed that the EPA or the USDA or some kind of federal agency or a third party lab or something provided testing. So if I had a product I wanted to get registered, there had to be some sort of objective study to show that it was safe. But that's not how it works in our country. How it works is I provide that science along with my application. And I say, we did this study and it shows that it was safe. So you can imagine that there is some critique around that as a flawed system. So seed treatments aren't even counted as a pesticide application. So they fall under this loophole called a device. So products that are regulated as a device, they don't have to have a pre-market review. So unlike pesticides, so if I was spraying the same product, it would be considered a pesticide, and the and FIFRA would require registration. But because it's listed as a device, it doesn't require registration, and it's not required to track the quantities. We don't have efficacy data for registration. I mean, it's big. So this is one way that it's getting into our environment and affecting. I mean, we're saying bees and pollinators, but certainly, birds and all up the food chain, like just lots of and us. Okay, so hopefully you'll see this animation. We see the estimated use of imidacloprid, and you can just see it kind of going on up, right? It was something that neonics kind of started in the 90s. They, like most chemistries, the idea was, oh, this is going to be less, less concerning. It'll be more effective, less damaging than some of the stuff that had been on the market. But as it turns out, once it gets used, right, and we see lots of field trials happening and actual real life kind of application, we see there's actually quite a lot of problems with it. But you can see, yeah, continues to more and more and more. Okay, I wanted to just show this really quickly. Dave Hackenberg sent these a while back, and this was sent just some pictures showing colonies with and without exposure. And this is from a fungicide, not a pesticide, but it'll give you an idea of some of the things that can happen. So here we have pre-spray colonies, and then they're spraying fungicide in the middle picture there. And then we see 4 days post-exposure to the fungicide. So there are dead bees on the ground. I have more pictures as we go through this. And there's not as many flying bees, even though the orchard has much more bloom on that day. So here's a better kind of close-up of that. So they're pretty loaded on 2 days prior, and then we see, a lot of losses. So this is something that we would say was an acute kill, but actually, these colonies didn't completely die. There was an acute kill of a lot of the bees, but then what happens is now even though like we wouldn't if that wouldn't officially be counted as a loss, but as a beekeeper, you could see that massively impacted the future of your colony. So now you have to spend, more time and energy and resources trying to build this back up. And depending on when this kind of thing happened, what time of the year, this could impact and likely impact your colony's ability to make it through the winter and that kind of thing. So it isn't something that you would count as an acute kill, but this is potentially something that would happen. You'd lose a lot of bees. The colony would struggle, and then 6 months later, it would succumb to this damage. So, and then Dave pointed out in this, this close up here. an irregularity in the egg laying pattern. This one doesn't match the capped brood on the other frames in the hive. Um, Also discoloration of the jelly bed in some cells. So these larvae are not doing well. And yeah, so we can see, yeah, just kind of some immediate impact on that. And here's a picture of bees. This is from one of the publications we have, and or yeah, one of many. And so I think this one is an important one because I think beekeepers, um, we have this, people who are not beekeepers have this romantic idea of what beekeeping is like. And, and I think maybe that was true at some point in history, but I think especially with commercial beekeepers, it's a different, a different environment now, right? And so, just like ongoing, constant struggle to do things like replace dead hives throughout the year, a third to a half of bees operating at diminished capacity at any given time. They often will build extra colonies in the spring because they'll know that heavy losses are going to follow through the growing season. And then this one is interesting. The numbers reported to the USDA and like Bee Informed Partnership, they reflect a temporary peak, not the ongoing mortality rates. So beekeepers will often overbuild their colonies. Because that excessive mortality has become the new normal. So overall, the loss rates are maybe not showing the whole picture because they're also not saying, well, I had to, build up, twice as many bees as I started with, but so I lost X amount. So then they don't take that extra buildup into consideration with that. So the numbers are, it's a little bit, doesn't tell the whole picture. Always, certainly depending on how you interpret the data. Before colony collapse disorder, annual hive losses averaged 5 to 15%. Today, losses are 50 in general. Um, and CCD coincided with this. I don't know if you noticed with the neonic map there, but with that, that's one of many types of neonics. It kind of coincided with this big application that was happening in the early 2000s, and so CCD was kind of happening in, I think, 2006, and so this big application of these, we think, is a big component of it. Let's see here. Okay, so how often have you heard I treated for Varroa, my hives still died? So what's really killing your bees? This was a study that came out last year, and we were really excited to see this because it's challenging. I mean, not excited. It was depressing to see this, but we were excited to see that there was more proof of something that has been a struggle to get people to hear and understand. And so this study showed, like in the field, that neonic exposure increased Varroa mite severity in honeybee colonies. Um, and, colonies exposed to neonics showed an average of 5.3 more mite drop in 24 hours than non-exposed colonies. Um, it is a notable finding that we confirm in field that neonics can exacerbate the abundance of the parasite Varroa, which is arguably the single most severe contributor to managed honeybee losses in the US. So if you're interested, I suggest you take a look at this study. It's, easily available. You can just even do a Google search and find it. It's really fascinating to see that, and it's really good to have that science. Okay, so that's a lot of background about what is going on and what the situation that beekeepers and, pollinator protection folks are kind of up against. So what can we do to help support some pollinators? So we're going to look at a few of these different options, and then hopefully I'll be able to leave maybe 10 or 15 minutes for some discussion at the end. So gardening for pollinators. So I'm an organic farmer, and I love farmers. I work part-time for this organization, and I also work part-time for a land-grant university in food systems. We need farmers, and our organization, even though oftentimes we are frustrated with some of the practices in conventional agriculture, I think we all very much acknowledge the importance. Like we all rely on farmers, right? And so we want to make sure that we can do some things in our backyard to help support pollinators. And also, there are some of these practices that can be employed, on a more widespread way to help support pollinators. So, one of the things you can do is you can plant a variety of garden flowers. So, different flowers attract different pollinators. So, having different ones would be great for that. One thing is that bees collect one type of pollen during a foraging trip. So, it's nice to have like a few things in a single little section, so maybe like 3 feet square, will attract more bees. But even single plants can be found and enjoyed by pollinators. So one of the things I do at our farm is, like this is a picture from our place, is at the end of every bed, we have 4-foot beds that are, 50 plus feet long. At the ends of each bed, we plant a bunch of flowers. We also have flowers periodically throughout the beds, but definitely at the beginning and end of every one. And we have tons of pollinators visiting a lot. You want to water your plants regularly. Pollinators need water to survive, so it's important to do that. Mulching your garden can be helpful. Mulch helps to retain the moisture in the soil. We talk a lot about managed pollinators, but there's certainly lots of nesting pollinators that could use that area, that mulch for habitat. Using a layer of organic mulch around plants to reduce evaporation is a good way to help, have, you know, good use of water also so that we're not losing it in the sun into the heat. One thing I like to recommend, if it's possible, if you have a backyard garden or a small scale, production garden, is switching to no-till. This concept has gained a lot of traction in the last, I would say, 5 years for sure, but it may be closer to 10. People are starting to talk about how there are problems when we're tilling the soil. I mean, I've been on this piece of land for 25 years, and we tilled very minimally, a couple times a year max, and did not use a tractor to compact soil. It was a walk behind tiller, and did all the things like applying compost and that kind of thing. But I will say that after you know, pushing close to 20 years of using those methods, the soil was showing signs of degradation. There was damage. We switched to no-till and it is like night and day. So the cool thing about no-till is that you don't have to have special tools. I would suggest if you want to learn more about this in general, it's a good idea to connect with your local extension office. That would be a good way to learn more about this. You can also, on my emails at the end, and you can email me and I can make some recommendations on where you can find more information. But it makes great use of waste materials. Basically, you kind of layer up like a lasagna, and when you're making one for the first time, you might do it kind of how this little cross section shows, where you might have a few layers of cardboard, and then some straw or leaves, and then some food waste or some manure, some straw and leaves, and kind of layered up, and then topsoil on the top. You can also take an existing garden bed and just stop tilling and start topping with mulch and with compost annually if you already have a space that has been tilled. The way that instead of tilling, what we do is especially for a smaller production, and by smaller, I mean like, an acre or something, you can do tarping. So you can use billboard vinyl or some kind of silage tarps or something, and you can just lay that down when, maybe 6, 8 weeks before you want to plant in the spring, and cover everything and take it off before you want to plant, throw on a layer of compost, and you're kind of good to go. Um, it's great for heavy soils, very affordable, less backbreaking work. It increases soil health. It's beneficial to the soil, helps build the soil. It mimics nature. So the idea is you're not really ever leaving soil kind of exposed to the elements, which is, we know if we go into a natural landscape, we don't see that. We don't see bare, huge acres full of bare soil. we see, forests or we see grasslands or something, the soil is always covered. And so in this way, we're kind of mimicking that as a departure from conventional or even like traditional organic agriculture. So anyway, I'm obviously partial to this. I think it's great. And please feel free to reach out if you want any more information, resources about this. Um, Another thing that you can do is you can plant different types of plants, right? So annuals complete their life cycle in one season. When we have a garden in our backyard, we primarily grow annuals. Biennials will complete their life cycle over two growing seasons. So like kale is an example of this. We would plant kale in the spring. It makes good greens for us all summer long. If you're in an area that it can overwinter, then it kind of just, the growth kind of slows to, halt or very, very slow growth of the winter. And then the following spring, it starts growing again and sending up flowers, and then which then become your seed, and you can harvest those, late in the season, that second growing season. Perennials grow for many years. So planting species that bloom in different seasons to extend the enjoyment of the garden and the food availability for pollinators. I think it's important to have annuals, perennials, and biennials all planted in your garden if possible. Again, really useful for pollinators. Lots of, where most people have some perennials. If you have a little fruit tree or something, you have perennials that are great for bees. A variety of flower colors are going to attract a diverse variety of bees. And so, planting different colors also really useful for pollinators. I will say also, if you're in an area that, there's certain pollinators that you want to help support, again, probably a local extension office would be a good way to get us, talk to the master gardeners in your area to see what are the plants that are most popular, most useful for, this particular type of pollinator that you want to support. Um, this is a big country and there's just lots of different pollinators and different plants. And so it would do best for you to get the information that's appropriate for your bioregion. Okay, so saving seeds. So when we save seeds, right, the plant has made a flower and then it sets its own, and then the flower becomes seed. So you can save those, very easy to save those. Most of us for an annual garden, there are a lot of different plants that make a flower and then we eat the fruit. But for flowers, like, tomato is a good example of that. But for flowers that don't make fruit, like lettuce is an example, right? We eat the leaves. We don't eat, the flowers or the seeds from the lettuce. So we typically wouldn't allow the lettuce to go to seed. And I think that, when you're done, enjoying the lettuce, plant enough lettuce that you can let some of it go to seed. When it bolts in the heat, don't pull it out. Let it go let it flower and let the bees utilize that. That pollen and then save seed. And that's a whole other conversation about how useful it is as a gardener to save seed and why that's so important. But good for the bees. Another thing you can do is intercropping or like polyculture. So this is more than one species grown at the same time, place, in proximity as others. And we see this in a natural landscape, right? We don't see rows in a forest of trees, one type of plant, monoculture. We don't really see that. What we see in nature is a diverse assortment of plants. So that's also going to attract a broader array of pollinators. And so it's nice to have those little blocks, but mixing it up, having all different types of plants like we see here, or even something simple, like I mentioned, putting flowers at the beginning and end of every garden bed that you have. Another thing that can be useful is integrated pest management practices. So this is an effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest management. It relies on some really basic premises and is, useful. Not it's most often applied right in like a agriculture setting, but actually you can this is you can do this throughout your whole like residence, right? Not just in your garden. So let's take a look. I think I've got an infographic here. Yeah. So you start by identifying and monitoring. Like, so there's some sort of insect that you think is causing a problem. Then what is the insect? You figure out what it is and you kind of monitor it. If you don't know what it is, your local master gardener program often will have plant clinics, and you can bring in samples of the bugs, or ask questions like that, and then you can evaluate. Is the pest causing damage? How much damage? Do you actually need to act? So, if it's, if there's a difference between, what is an acceptable level of, visual damage and what might actually threaten, your plant. And so, if I'm growing kale and I have flea beetles, and the flea beetles are attacking my plant, well, um, I don't care. If I'm not selling those leaves, I don't care that much. I can eat some leaves that have holes in them. It's not a problem. Um, if especially if it becomes a choice of spraying or not spraying something, even an organic spray, right? Uh, but if it gets to a certain level that it might actually like kill my kale plant, then maybe I look at another option. So then you can do some prevention things. So that would be the thing to try to address. With flea beetles, one of the things that I do is I use floating row cover, like Remay fabric or something, because that it protects, it kind of acts as a barrier. I also do crop rotation, so that I like one of the things that flea beetles attack in my garden is would be like brassicas, like cabbage or broccoli or kale, that kind of thing. So I rotate those so that I'm not growing the same thing in the same location every year. Another thing I do is I do intercropping, polyculture. So I might plant in a bed a couple broccoli plants, and then maybe a half dozen beets, and then a couple broccoli plants, and then a half dozen beets. And so that way it breaks it up so that there's not a big infestation. So there's lots of ways that you can prevent damage through IPM without resorting to like chemicals. And then, if you need to take action, then looking at the least invasive type of option, like the least damaging option. And one thing to look for is you really want to read the label. Sometimes things look organic, like the one on the left-hand side looks organic. Actually, I think both of these are not organic, but they look organic. They even say the word organic, but they're not actually organic. So, one thing that you can do in the US is to look for the OMRI symbol. If you don't see it, I would suggest contacting the manufacturer or looking on the OMRI website, because sometimes they don't have the symbol, but they are actually organic. It's worth checking out that registry. So this is a way that you can kind of ensure that it is organic. However, organic pesticides are still pesticides. So here we have a picture of an organic pesticide. It's certified organic, has the OMRI symbol, and then we have the same like chemical in it. It's pyrethrin, so it's extracted from chrysanthemum flower, natural. However, really deadly, really effective. And so we see it here in a shampoo for cats and dogs, right? Kills fleas. So it affects an insect's nervous system, really, very good at killing fleas, but it also is going to kill beneficial insects like bees. It can be certified organic or non-organic. When it's non-organic, it's just usually mixed with something else. It's also really can be not great for us as humans to be around the application of this, right? So just pay attention. It's still a last resort, even if it's organic. And when you're looking at it, do a little research to figure out, is this something that is safe for pollinators before applying? And then if you do choose to, if you're like, yes, I have to apply this, this is, I've tried all the things and I've looked at everything, and I'm going to have this big loss if I don't apply it, then try to take the pollinators' needs into consideration, right? Apply it at a time that bees aren't flying, that kind of thing. And I think this can be done, and many farmers try to do this in more conventional ag as well. Okay, we're doing pretty good on time. What can you do beyond some of the things that you can do at home? Um, you know, how do you, maybe start advocating for change? And so I want to talk a little just briefly about our organization. So what we do is we work on behalf of beekeepers, farmers, and friends of pollinators, and we kind of try to make sure that interests and concerns are brought forward in national, state, and local discussions of pesticide use and policy. So we often collaborate with other organizations like the American Bird Conservancy, industry groups like the American Beekeeping Federation, to look at what's going on and try to collaborate and send, if we're doing advocacy efforts, we try to send a message, as a group that's more impactful. Um, we do a lot of educational programs. So we provide educational opportunities to help community members support pollinator health. We try to help educate farmers to learn how they can support pollinators by using sustainable methods without reducing yield, right? Because we're gonna have a hard time convincing people to not, farmers to not use chemistry if they're like, oh yeah, well I can, then my crop is going to decrease by like, down to 10% of what it was. No, that's not what we're trying to do. We understand that that we need that to stay. And then also to help folks understand and recognize the impact of pesticides on pollinator health. I think mostly people just are not aware. And I think that's an important thing, and that's something that you can do now, is help educate people. So there's a couple ways you could become a member here. Ideally, I think it would be great if anyone in this attending this meeting is part of a local beekeeping organization or a state beekeeping organization. Check to see if they're a member of PSC. We love when we can get bee organizations to become members. It helps support our efforts in different advocacy and education. We have all kinds of resources and things that members can use. And it also helps us show collective impact. So when we say to the EPA, please do not allow this product on the market. It's been shown to be pretty catastrophic to pollinators. It's one thing for us to sign that letter. It's another for 50, beekeeping organizations to sign that letter, right? And you can become a member as an individual or as an organization. You can also donate. You can look at our website for a look at what we do with funds. We've stretched. I'm a part-time like staff member, and I'm it. So, it's volunteer. Like, the vast majority of our work is conducted by volunteers. And, all of our information is available online. You can see exactly how we spend our money, and we try to stretch every penny. And then also educate and advocate, right? So help spread the word. So these are some things that you can do like today. You could follow PSC or other similar protection, like pollinator protection organizations on like social media. You can sign up for mailing lists. We post our posts include links to articles, calls to action, educational posts. You can share them, you can download them. And so that's one way that you can be helping now. That's something that you can do. Here are some of those movies I talked about, and the one that I was talking about in particular is The Pollinators. And a number of our board members, actually, I think possibly most or all of the people in this film maybe are also include some past board members, but are about half, I think at least three of them, I think are current board members. But talking about, it's really fascinating. It's a look at primarily almond pollination, but looking at pollinator services and what's happening with bees in our modern food system. So I think it's really interesting, also a little terrifying because you realize how fragile things are. But yeah, these are all really great movies, and I would suggest most of these you can watch for free on, Amazon or Netflix or something. So we also have a bunch of different resources. These are, just a sample of some easy ones. We have a whole series of without pollinators, we would lose, and there's, maybe 20 different, little infographics or things that we have available. And so feel free to, they're all available for download online. You can share them, you can post them on your site. If you have a newsletter or something, please feel free to utilize those materials, share on social media. There are different things too, like easy steps to keep your bees safe in the neighborhood. So what if you are in a neighborhood and you're concerned about people spraying? How do you, are there ways to like share that with neighbors, or what can you do to like help build relationships so that people will support the work that you're doing in your neighborhood? And then I wanted to just show these very quickly. So we have a series of six publications. They're available for download on the website, and um, sometimes we also have print versions of these that you can order in bulk for free. And so we should have some of those available, the print ones, in the next month or so. But these are, I think, great because you can, you can share them, download them as a PDF, and share them, you know, online or with your membership. Um, and they are topical, right? So here's one on neonics. Neonics are so toxic, a single treated seed can kill 80,000 bees. And there's an acute, an acute kill. So it just talks in general about this. And the idea with these is these are not for scientists. These are not for experts. These are for people who just like want to learn a little bit more and have a better understanding so that they can help protect pollinators. This one is, it's the mites because, right? Like, that people often think their bees died because of varroa, but there are other things that are weakening the bees. Like we see this with lifestyle illnesses in humans, right? We see that if you have had a lifestyle where you are not exercising and you're eating a really poor diet and you're eating a ton of like processed food or something, right? That you're just more susceptible to certain illnesses, certain conditions. And so, as opposed to if you have a healthy, active kind of lifestyle. So it's similar. It's this exposure that weakens the bees. So anyway, this is I think a good one. This is talking about types of different exposures. So these are all two-page, front and back publications. And so yeah, this one has lots of different, how to tell, why we need it, that kind of thing. And then this is one, we often hear is the bee problem solved. Like, oh yeah, it's, bees are fine now. So, what that actually, what's going on currently and kind of a bigger picture look. And then gardening for pollinators. So, how do pesticides impact them? How can you help? And then some specifics on one side, right? What you can do. And protecting pollinators at home. So here are all these different kind of factors in this, how to choose different, types of products, what's happening, different strategies you can do, and then some common household chemicals that are highly toxic to pollinators. Not a not a comprehensive list, but some common ones. So yeah, those are some publications that we have available. And we would really love to share a presentation with your bee club. We've got a few of our previous uh, like workshops posted on our YouTube channel. I'm going to put the link to this in the chat also in just a minute. So um, if you are part of a bee club or organization and you would like to host a presentation, please reach out to me. I would be happy to arrange a time for me to do that, or sometimes we can also have, depending on the topic and the time frame, we can also sometimes have one of our board members do that. Um, you'll see on the YouTube channel, there was a one that we did last summer, Ask an Expert, and it was like ask a commercial beekeeper your most pressing questions. So we had Dave Hackenberg and Brett 80 leading that workshop. So anyway, lots of options there. Okay, I'm also going to put a link in the chat. I am trying to learn more about how effective our presentations are, how interesting or impactful or useful our publications are. So I'm going to put this in the chat also, and I would love to get some input on this. And actually, in the next 2 weeks, I'm trying to collect this data for a particular event, and so I have a little drawing running. So if you fill this out, I think it's like before the 5th or something of September, we have some drawings. There's like a pollinator protection book, PSC shirt. I've got a bunch of sets of organic seed, that kind of thing. So we're drawing a few, and we're trying to offer a lot of prizes. So hopefully you have a pretty good chance of winning something it just takes a couple minutes to, it's not a big survey. Okay, so here are some different links and QR codes. And again, I'm going to put all this stuff in the chat. And I'm also going to put this recording on YouTube shortly, and so you can review that and, get these QR codes there also. But the one on the right is our mailing list. So if you probably many of you already are on this, but we send out a once a month newsletter. And there's different, calls to action. There are articles we try to like include pesticide news, so all different kinds of like research or programs or new ways that pollinators are being protected around the country, that kind of thing. Also, if you have any news or have interest or have heard of oh there's this great study that just came out, please contact me. Um, Easy, contact at pollinator-stewardship.org, and share that with me. I'm always looking for new content. And if you have something that you want to promote, please feel free to, reach out there or on social media, and we're happy to help share information for you also. Okay.